As you might have seen in the brochure, that the topic of my talk is quite contradictory in nature, extending the senses and restraining the senses at the same time. To give a larger picture, the topic of the whole conference is Cosmology and Consciousness, and the subtitle or subtopic on which we are having this conference is Knowing and Talking. Yesterday, people asked interesting questions about what is the connection between consciousness and cosmology. Of course, you cannot think about cosmology or anything else without the consciousness. So there is the connection. And especially from Buddhist viewpoint, the mind is the one that makes your destiny or mars your destiny. And therefore, the key point in Buddhist philosophy is exploring within and focusing within. And that's what I'm trying to do today. You will not see anything on the curtain, nothing outside. So I'm also even tempted to say that when I'm giving the talk, please close your eyes. I'm joking. I'm reminded of an encounter between a Buddhist monk by the name Malukya, who was at one point of the time meditating in his own heart. And he felt that the Buddha has been very compassionate to me and given to me lots of amazing, profound teachings. But still there are areas which he did not answer, so I'm feeling a little bit disturbed and unhappy. So I must go and ask him these questions, that I must get all the questions about the universe, cosmology, and everything. So those questions were, in Buddhism, what is known as the 14 unanswered questions. Whether there is a future life after the death, when did the universe come into beginning, and so on. So when he reached near the Buddha and asked this, shared his confusion, the Buddha said, "Who told you to become my student? When did I say that I have all the answers?" Then indirectly give the answer by saying, suppose if somebody had shot you and you're hit by an arrow, the arrow came from some direction about which you have no idea, whether it's from east, west, whatever. And the fact is that you are struck by the arrow and you are bleeding. So at that point of the time, what would you do? Will you immediately take the medical treatment? Or refuse to take the medical treatment by saying, let me first answer all the philosophical unanswered questions. Who shot the arrow? How tall the person may be? Whether he is a moustache or not? What is the bow and arrow made of? What was the speed? If you refuse to take the treatment by saying, unless I get all the answers related to this shooting, I will refuse to take the treatment, then before you get all the answers, you will be dead, or you will be in big trouble. So what would you do? Then the monk said, sir, medical treatment first. I suppose this is related to this topic, knowing and acting. While Buddha is not denying the importance of knowing, knowledge is very important, wisdom is very important. But it looks like what is even more important is acting. And he said that the world is full of suffering, sentient beings are terribly suffering, and we are in an urgent situation to get up, go and do things for others, to help others. I personally am very committed to doing things and encouraging others to do things, be it in solving the situation that Tibetans are facing today, or be it on a larger scale, solving the problems that the world is facing today. Instead of just talking from where the arrow came from and so forth, I think there are so many things we can do right now. Just few days back when I was giving this 5-day talk in New Delhi in the India Habitat Center, some people asked me the question by saying, Geshe Lhakdor, emptiness is so difficult. Then I said, don't make it as a fashion. It has become a fashion to people to say emptiness is so difficult, practice is so difficult. What did you practice which was difficult? Sharing a morsel of food to somebody who is hungry and dying is not so difficult. Extending a helping hand is not so difficult. Smiling is not so difficult. So many things you can practice, start practicing, through which you can gradually not only transform yourself and transform the whole world. So acting out of these two, knowing and acting, I would emphasize, because of the urgent need of the situation that is prevailing today in the world, acting is important. Whenever I give talk to such gatherings, I tell people, especially not this kind, but other kind of talks, especially Buddhist talks that I give, when people are there and I tell them that we need to practice now, not just listening. Because those people who come to such talks, they're already good people. Terrorists are not there. Probably people with different bent of mind will not be there. So you're already good. You already know so many things. But the roadblock is you are not doing, you are just talking. Compassion is not for talking. Wisdom is not for talking. Therefore, cultivation through rigorous practice. So to come back to this question of 5 senses, to make it a little bit more diction, I will probably read from here. Buddhist philosophy is based on the law of nature. As such, logic and reason that engages into the power of nature is extremely, extremely crucial. Even in your mundane, ordinary daily life, use your common sense, use logic and reason. Don't just follow the flock. It's extremely important. Especially in terms of establishing the object of knowledge, Buddhism has selected those areas of knowledge which is very crucial in our life and well-being, and has not tried to explain everything that is there in the universe. The object of knowledge established through logic should also be of such nature that ultimately one should be able to directly experience it. You develop a knowledge, develop a wisdom. The knowledge and wisdom that you have developed should be so strong that it will, as I said during the introductory talk, that it will color your emotion, it will move your whole being. And it's that emotion in the form of loving kindness and compassion which moves you to do things for others. So we're not just talking about any kind of information. Explanation about the 5 senses come mainly in the text is composed by Asanga, the pioneer of the mind-only school, and his follower Vasubandhu. They in turn rely their source in a very famous text called Chedashinzu Chemo. Who is the author of this text is not very clear. Some say that it is authored by 500 Arhats, which is a major treatise giving elaborate explanation of the manifest knowledge. With regard to the explanation of the senses, the higher Buddhist schools do not differ much from what has been explained in the Abhidharma. The 5 senses come within the class of form, and form, when we say form, it generally refers to that conditioned phenomena which can be obstructed and which can be hindered by other forms, however small and minute it may be, it can still be obstructed. So these senses are classified as internal forms and are necessarily be understood by the mental consciousness. It can be classified as eye sense, nose sense, ear sense, tongue sense, body sense, and so forth. But this, in Buddhism, the eye sense and so forth does not refer to any grosser physical organ. It is not the retina, or it is not the rod and cone, it's not the cochlea, nothing of that sort. It clearly says there is a drawing which is similar to those scientific findings in drawings, very similar. But in the end of the day, it says the sense power is extremely subtle particle, which is completely luminous. And in some text, it goes to the extent of saying that this very subtle sense even probably travels with the mind to the next life. Probably there is a link with this statement and the statement that we find when we explain the intermediate state being, where we say the intermediate state being is a being which is a very subtle physical form, but which has all the sense faculties intact. Probably there is a connection there. It's an interesting area to focus. Then another interesting focus, which is not so clearly found in many other texts, is this mention that in the case of this no sense, it is in the nature of water. And in the case of the eye sense, it comes from the quality of the nature of the fire. So these five senses are, again, related to the different five elements. Again, to me, clearly saying that they are, however small, minute, clear they may be, they are again related to the elements. So that makes sense, because everything arises from the elements, subtler elements, to the more grosser elements. So these sense organs do not refer to the gross external organ, but to the actual physical mechanism of perception. That's why it is called the one which controls the different sense consciousnesses, the controller, or the one which has the power. It is the mechanism which makes the different senses perceive in the form of different consciousnesses. The mind organ or mind sense, of course, there is a debate in the tradition as to just what physical structure there is. But in general, the mind organ and thought are treated as a sense and its object, because that is how they appear in experience. For example, we feel that we perceive our thoughts with our mind, just as we perceive a visible object with our eye. Despite that atmosphere of debate that surrounded some issues, there was unanimous agreement on the more experientially direct claim that each of the senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, had a different consciousness. That is, at each moment of experience, there was a different experience as well as a different object of experience. And of course, there is agreement that no actual self has to be found in consciousness, either in the experience or in the object of experience, or the mental factors binding them together. So again, the self remains very elusive. These six senses are important because when we talk about a body and mind, it really means that one has the six senses. Because even in brief situations, for example, eating a piece of fruit involve moments of each of the six sense consciousness. One sees, hears, tastes, smells, touches, and one thinks. Now what is interesting here is the animal also develops the use of the five senses. Man in his animal body has this same use. So that raises the question, what is it that distinguishes us from animals? But human beings are raised above it by several important differences: his faculty of speech, his erect physical posture, and the dramatic fact that in the sphere of mental operations, he is able to achieve what no animal can achieve. The grand difference between beast and man is difference of mind, sophistication of mind, which is in a way demonstrated in the structurally more complicated brain of a human being, as is explained in science. In the use of the five physical senses, other species of animals and birds have much more capacity than us. We need to realize this. We need to rely on many of these instruments that science has invented, but many of these animals, without relying on any of these instruments, they're able to perceive things much, much better and much, much clearer. Yet the reasoning intelligence and the creative imagination of a man are far superior to and far more valuable than the instinctive intelligence of any animal. For his intelligence enables him to invent an ingenious telescope which permits him to see what even the eagle cannot see. And his imagination enables him to recreate the physical world in his own way and thus construct an amazing aeroplane in which he can outfly the fastest bird. His power to reason out and his capacity to premeditate a course of action, imagining its probable consequences, also segregate him. Animals, birds, fish, and insects can all enjoy gross physical pleasure. This is another important point that I would like to highlight. But cannot enjoy aesthetic pleasures such as those of painting, music, and deep internal reflection, and so forth. So this shows clearly where should we pay more attention and focus if we are to distinguish ourselves from animals. His potentialities enable him to reflect upon his own significance and engage in not only physical realities but metaphysical thoughts. It is only human beings which can reason abstractly and feel the need to understand the truth and turn away from error, to judge appearances and not get carried away by tempting appearances. There is no other road confronting science than the road leading from physical to metaphysical truth. Yes, and when you go deeper and deeper, probably it looks like once again, at one point of the time, science got separated from metaphysical things and came to pay more attention to the physical reality. Now more and more you engage into understanding the deeper realities of the nature, it looks like, again, you will not find a road that would not lead from physical to metaphysical truth, from observation made by the senses to illumination found by the mind. Our great sages and thinkers say that real happiness does not come from us, from our sensual pleasures. Gratification of the senses, according to them, leads to more desires which actually act as a fuel to the fire. What science has done, this is the reality, I'm not criticizing. What science has done is extending the scope of and reach of the senses. By doing so, it was able to help perceive things which our ordinary senses could not. But through that, it has also supplied more fuels to the senses which were already burning. Even by observing the ordinary engagement and the obsession with the sensual objects, the Buddha had to, that was before science invented these machines, the Buddha had to acclaim, the world is on fire. Imagine what the Buddha would say if he is in New York today. Because desires are like the rubber band and stops only when it breaks. Will you sit in a car if it has no brakes? So what I'm trying to say is that it's important to pay attention to the controlling energy. You call it mind, you call it brain, rather than just the senses. So how would you ensure that the senses do not go wild? Technology has supplied us with the means of communicating thought in ways that would have astonished our forefathers. But it has given little attention to supplying us with ways of cultivating intuitive thought. We may telephone from New York to Mumbai, but it's not so important that you are able to phone. But what is important is the value of what we say is the real test of our progress. Yes, science and technology has extended the power of our senses to see things that our ordinary unaided senses cannot. But what really matters is not what and how far we can perceive by our senses, but what we perceive. The problem with us, this has been touched earlier, that despite our trying our best, we remain as we are. We are conditioned, whatever you want to call it. Because the problem is, we normally see what we want to see, not what we should be seeing. Normally hear what we want to hear, not what we should be hearing. Now, who would tell us what we should see, what we should do? And that, I would say, is related to the elimination of suffering and acquiring of happiness. This reminds me of what Dignaga, the great Buddhist epistemologist, mentions in his Parmanavartika while talking about Buddha's omniscient mind. He says, Buddha is called omniscient, not because he has seen everything, although we say he is omniscient, which means he has seen everything. But the main reason why he is called omniscient is not because he has seen everything, but because he has seen what must be seen. He knows what must be adopted, and he knows what must be discarded. And in a more sarcastic way, he makes the remark by saying, if simply seeing something far off is really important, then you better invite eagle and have him as your teacher, because the eagles are able to see far off things than the human beings can do. Even if seeking happiness is a natural human instinct, the moot point is what makes one happy. Self-indulgence? Use your common sense. Or transcending sensual desires and finding fulfillment in rising to a higher spiritual plane and bringing happiness to others. While acknowledging the needs of the senses, if we let the senses go wild without restraint, that's why I'm saying restraining is important. In fact, it is one of the preconditions for the Buddhist meditators, that restrain the senses, have moderation in your food, engage in yoga. So there are several preconditions. So because if you don't restrain them, we'll be engulfed by fires of suffering. We do not need any example better than the way we run today in the pursuit of sensual objects. We equate fleeting pleasures with lasting happiness, and to some extent get so addicted to these superficial pleasures that we do not get time and have no interest to look within the real source of long-lasting happiness and peace. True to the fact, you do not find reliable happiness in things outside of you, whether you like it or not. This is the bitter truth. You will find that long-lasting peace and happiness within you. But still you think that maybe I'll get happiness from this object. And then you use this object for some time, not finding happiness from there, you change the object. That's why not only people are now moving from one object to another object, they're also moving from one wife to another wife, one husband to another husband, changing everything. Thinking that from just changing the external situation, you will be happier and you will get that long-lasting peace and happiness. So keep on changing things without changing yourself, and you end up running the whole life like Angulimala. I'm sure you know the story of Angulimala. He was a murderer, and he killed, I think, 99 people, and looking for the last one. And on that day, Buddha intentionally appeared closer to him. So Angulimala was chasing Buddha and said, "Look, halt! Are you not scared? The dreadful murderer Angulimala is chasing you." Then Buddha stopped and smiled and looked back and said, "It is not me who is not stopping. It is you who is not stopping." True. So we are like that Angulimala. So as a result of running around like Angulimala, what we got is that we are now in a quagmire of problems and frustrations known to us today as stress, loneliness, depression, low self-confidence, low self-esteem, and the list is long. Okay with time? 10 minutes, lucky. So time and again, the restless mind had run and chased after sense pleasures and worldly relations, seeking company in relationship, not knowing that they are short-lived and not the reliable source of peace. We have been forced to abandon all these so-called external material facilities in all of our previous lives, and we'll have to abandon them in this life as well. This is again another bitter truth. So it's important that we immerse ourselves in meditation of the primordial awareness or the luminous nature of the mind and the ultimate reality of all phenomena, the universal truth. And transform the mind to help us tread the correct path to happiness. We know through our own experience and also through scientific findings that when we respond negatively to people and the situations, we set in motion a negative trend in our entire body system. All our emotions are electrochemically charged and intrinsically connected to the endocrine, nervous, and immune system through our thoughts and feelings. I always tell people, your principal is not your boss. Your prime minister is not your boss. In the true sense of the term, your mind is your boss. So it is a challenge for you what kind of boss you want to elect. A negative, disturbed state of mind which hijacks your life, which terrorizes your life, or mind that would bring harmony, peace, lucidity, and calmness. The choice is yours. So if the systems are negatively charged, they set in motion a chain of negative reactions. In Tibetan we say, "Kange lugu gyu de nyawa." Hence we need to respond carefully to situations in life, even from the viewpoint of the survival of the fittest. The use of violent, murderous force against other creatures merely to support and nourish existence is natural and proper in a beast, but I would say it is immoral and improper in a man. Imagine, with all these dangerous, sophisticated machines in our hand, if we, in the name of survival of the fittest, start killing each other, which is unfortunately happening in many parts of the world today. So imagine what will be the end result. Such supposed human attributes as anger, greed, hate, and desire, and the desire for revenge are really animal ones. So again, it's your choice whether you want to become a sane human being or insane, destructive animal. In war, they find the worst and fullest expression. I suppose I don't need to read everything. So the issue is whether we are losing our human qualities through over-dependence on techno-intelligence. This is another very worrisome point, because during the discussion this morning it was discussed. It was an interesting question where you asked this question that whether spirituality or contemplative tradition is progressing at the same speed to that of the science. No, it is not. To me, I would say it is not. Because again, it's very much related to the human weakness, that what is outside you, when it's something that you can play with and fiddle with, you easily go there. When you talk about contemplative practice, spiritual practice, you need to go within. You don't like to go within. It's lonely when you're not used. But then does this justify to say that we should go more and more for the external material progress and forget the inner values because there are a lesser group of people doing this? No. Because it's like saying an innocent child who wants to, because of his age and immaturity, wants to play with the toys, then is it justifiable to say that, okay, now the rest of your life you play with the toys? The child plays with the toys for a short time, then as and when he grows up, okay, now this is not your time. Be mature, do something positive, something greater. So if we let ourselves completely controlled by the technology, because unfortunate part is the science, technology comes from science. Science has many valuable things to share, but majority of the people have no idea about this latest good findings of the science, but what they have access to is technology, which impinges their life in each and every part. So therefore, when you have the technology in your hand, we have a Tibetan saying which says, "Puchung tagu li kyomado." That means it's really like a child letting him fly a rocket. It's very dangerous. So that is, I think, quite bothersome. So the issue is whether we are losing our human qualities through over-dependence on techno-intelligence. Professor Warwick points out, it's interesting, he points out that almost all our activities will take place within a machine-augmented world in the next decade. It very looks like that. And the only way we can fully participate in such a reality will be by developing a symbiotic relationship with the machine through implants and wearable prosthesis, which we are doing. Another problem is spirituality and thereby religion, in one sense, has been legislated through ethical directives, while the cyberpunk may give in to unregulated fantasy in the name of getting knowledge and in the name of giving freedom. People are allowed to do everything, and God knows what will be the end result. I'm only talking about the risk. I'm not saying that these are all useless. So let me conclude, because before the president says stop, I should better stop. So most of us have conditioned ourselves to think of man as the pinnacle of evolution, the large size to which the brain has evolved in the human being, and the formation and shape of the cerebral cortex are superficially observable. But even then, the quintessential humanness of this mystery called man is yet to be revealed. Perhaps the closest we have come to putting our finger on what marks man out amid the entire kaleidoscope of creation is to have identified the human capacity for self-awareness. Man is not only aware of what happens around him by virtue of his faculties of perception, he is also conscious of the fact that he is capable of his own awareness of beholding himself in a mirror. It is because of this unique human capacity for self-awareness that ancient seers emphasized the supreme importance of knowledge of the self and the mind. And what is the true nature of the self? The elusive, evanescent, and esoteric nature of the self is much more mysterious to unravel than the invisible atom, the fundamental building block of the physical world. If I look at the Buddhist process of knowledge, a Buddhist subject called awareness and knowledge is a very important subject taught to the monastic students much earlier on. And even if you look at the epithet of the word Buddha, the Tibetan equivalent Sangye, which means someone who is fully awake from ignorance and who knows everything. When we say the enlightened Buddha is fully awake, it also has, unfortunately, the implication that the rest of us are sleeping. Of course, you will say, I'm not sleeping, I'm participating and listening to the conference. But you are not awake from the deeper sleep of ignorance. So the extension of knowledge has to be done by fine-tuning the mind and empowering it, and not just by relying on machines and helping the senses to see things far off. And how can we transform, how can we do that? There is no magical solution. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says in his latest book, Beyond Religion, it should be done through a combined use of common sense, something that is sensible to everybody, understandable to everybody, common experience, and scientific findings, unbiased scientific findings. In this way, if you are truly convinced of the truth and what is going on around you, perhaps there is hope that we can change and we can become better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geshe Lhakdor, for shedding light on your subject while remaining personally quite mysterious. Invite the Geshes to ask questions.
Ani the gingi konsolani ngarazo daje temba gichi ani shija da yuji ni zu kandeji na da ani shigowa de kechimbo shujires da shiba le ani lalen tare de kechimbo shujires na son yures ro ti ngarazo ngene demba le da digon ma shi danzo ge ni lalen ta yon digon ani chi nima chi sena mundu chi ngarazo gange gichi semna ha go야지라 아니 미 송보지도 셈바 송보지고 밀 노바지고 말아서도 강강하로서기 하고 대신 마시래. 저서 dindi즈는 다 밀 셈바 송보지에서 긴기 당에서 오는 저지 님 갑드지 지때야도 들리라고 온다고 정말로 뜻이 아니 제토그레스 얘는 다 남자 진도지 마 짱는 로고 되고라 다딘 로부터 와지로 셈바 송보든 로부터 와지 쫀조야지도 아니 차지도 마스나 차전 추는 로게지로 다딘 로바데 아니 가르질라더니 중요요레스네.
The question is regarding to the practice that we know, but it's difficult to practice. Especially, it's extremely difficult to undertake a sustained practice. So, what is the magic solution? Yes, samjul tadi kumdi tengera rekya, kumdi tengera. Pena tanjingi pe chung jishare. Ko kumdi di yung wala tangbo suzu semla towa chegi lega ji chegu yore. Tat kaga di lamsan chetu gu yomare. Jasan ko chik tangbo jimba tanga sunu chung chigli ne cheba ina. Tili tene suzu cheba la samlo ji korgu yore. Tene lega ji chegi yore. Du se ne pagi dila ji ko gasur chung du yang suzu di ji chung du se je ne ene kumdi di ende ta keshe hyo insare. Ta magom na samlo na la ta ti chegu duwa dire duwa sem sangpo chegu da hien sangma hien ma je na. Any the Yungu Samar, the Lamsan goes away in Sare, that nature you see me in Sare. Inji Tambe Jore Charangi Karasawarda Suzuki Karichito de la Samlotana, Tanga di not the Chichido, some the Gani digres, near the Shingi, you did Chido, some digres. In a mig di Sigmares, Charangi Karichimen del Sigre, Sejore, Tidoda Chirecha, Taco. Kotanda peda chikta sending the tumba scenario, Titan things on Jig, then tumba scenario, Kumula, Kun Nanju get that cement or not, Tong your dedication was Sigurwa. There's a Tong of a Chigi, Tinduches or the tumba Caritolina. Tinicali Calicoya, Sava Sabatuso, Yam the Droya during the Droya Carina, that in the regiment, that complete. So I'm basically saying it's getting habituated. Because if you don't start, you will never get habituated. So when it comes to doing good, you don't have to start with a revolutionary, drastic step, but to start smiling with somebody, making his life easier, and give a morsel of food. And to do that, you need a little bit of good motivation, you need a little bit of action. And if you do repeatedly these things, then you get accustomed to it, and you will act naturally. But if you never start, and keep on thinking that I can do, therefore I am doing, if you are under that illusion, then I said, this is similar to what somebody said. You judge yourself, but what you think you can do, but other people will judge you what you have done. So we need to demonstrate and show a little bit of that. Yeah.
The Samola Dashi Dilishabat Church, Gishila, Angazo, that number Sonji Bishungi Karsons, Jiten de la Chin Jiten, Nangi Juten Sag, Nitani Dosna, Ninam Shani Gani, Nisung. Sondanta ni to Tenrubi ni Tajasin, the Tenrubi Shonli Nangla, that you Chinji Dengue, any Namsha Yamato, any Nanga Ninjitanga, Chola, Desam Machoba, and Tindiga, Niji, Cholando Chichonova. Tin Sondan Nanga Nijitenla, Machobi Jijin so the Banani Chinjidenge, that ye in Ibo Nilitila Jetanga, Awambonga Yilan Jutsu, and in Namja Kuna Zamjimato, Yiji number Shiva said, and Dog maybe. Jijin Tindijila Teni, Anichi Nangan Jitenge, Anili Zebala, 다 디링 그 총든 됐다고 초급이 아니 인생 딘지지 이나면나스 안데 렌 지소노나스
다딩에서 마찬가지나 통마 누저베 따루 필로소피 따루 다리용도 뒤도 세니게제 개요 말에 따루 다르기요래 디가블다 the metaphysicals 다 수대게 릭바 망보지 기계요래 두서 나라다 남히세 남히세 두서 차상요래 근데 림베직을 파제 다 코데오토는 히야베나 다디 코주소주메게 망보히에는 처음도 다의 요게 통의 요게 세자 중에 근데 지간은 도고도 세네 두슬레비사레 세리디 렙디 단난 따두기다 지금 abstract 세고로방아죠 그러나 지금 통의 토의메게 되는 망보히에도 두서 마자진의 통의 토의가 수입렙니 제가 지금 고주용도 근데 단도 달레바다 지금 수진을 마덴베게 넘버 히바세 두서 히에 메바시네 두서 차이사레 다이나 링고방에 속도 찍을 라비에죠 마인 라이프 속도 찍갑래 Did you consider the leper Samlotang, your same Samlotang, Dolan, what you so? Engate, Soja Chubba Cobbling, Etin Lanchene. Bring all good news, share yours line, because the chatung are watching Nigel. Caresse. That leper Samlotang in a cheaper came and do, same Samlotan, cheaper came and do. Susu Kujotan, Samlotan, you wrote to us line, Sudoyan and do. Susu you wrote to Wati. 11 children doing the social Yakuchagan and the same you wrote to doing the social Yakuchan, you wrote to us, they cheered to us like. So they do Chiga, that then I'm going to do so, Pinsu Kodruche and the Labdu, Penatanji Koranga Sonswa. Yarab Sanju, Gage, the city in Alzani, Yomares. In a team, maybe Jumzenji, Juman and San, go him and do say Yomare, the Injimage, some of them, Kitchen, which I do say, the Nijik, Call Nanswa. Did you do Kota Kali, Tanji Mangushi, and I call me Miranda, what Sending was a Karlavna Malana. Did you do go Hako Yundu in the Rebellion because of Chita? No Siki Lela Mandroy, Yamship, Pentoy, Lela, Yamship, the nation Yundu, then they have a Yungu. So their question was since it does not, science does not seem to be speaking about consciousness, so how can we, during this kind of conference, how those of us, the monks who talk about Buddhist consciousness and importance of inner mind, is it going to make some difference to the scientists in changing their perception or helping them? So that was the question. So I said it will take time, but of course we'll help each other. So if you want to say something. Okay.
Yeah, I see a challenge here, which is that we have the potential and the model and the inspiration for mindfulness or compassion from the Buddhist tradition, but we also have this institution of science which includes scientists but also bureaucracies and governments and so on, and exercising that mindfulness or compassion in the pursuit of the science at the big scale is a challenge, even when some individuals are thinking the right way.
Ta gomdrub da semgi nenga tende go samlo tang yoba nashi nujobe nala ya shungi lega chige da serik pa da eni me gerba tu so mangbu ki ko serik gi lega chidu de khanju mujung mai ba chen the he te ne chi phendo khari do mendo ti che go re se jine ko le lo chig mare den ro yo re se do